Hello and welcome to the Path to Power podcast with me, Dominy. On this podcast, I talk to incredible men and women who have fought adversity and are turning their pain into power. I talk to people overcoming childhood trauma, abuse, and unhealthy relationships who now have brands, businesses, and are breaking the cycle to change their generational legacy. Today, I am so excited to be bringing to you Aliyah, who is an incredible young woman, the founder of an organisation called Daddyless Daughters, and just doing incredible things with her story. And the organisation mentors girls that have absent fathers, not just physically, but emotionally as well. So Aliyah, welcome to the podcast.
Having me. I'm so excited to be with you.
Me too. Even though we're doing this over Zoom, we were saying before, like the way that our energies are vibing, it's just really exciting, isn't it?
It is. It feels like we've known each other soul sisters. And that's what I love about the work that we do as well. You know, it connects people and creates communities. That's just so lovely to be a part of, man.
100%. And what I notice about you is how much of your authentic self you bring into your work, you know, how much of your own story around the pain that you've faced in terms of, you know, having an absent father. And I don't know loads about your story. We're going to get into that, but how much of that you bring to your work. And I think it is that authenticity, isn't it, that really connects.
And like you said, like once you make that transition from pain to power and you walk in it, you claim it and you own it, you can live unapologetically in your authentic self. So I'm just grateful to get to this point, and I'm just owning the journey, like just on it really.
Absolutely. And like we were saying though before we started recording, it's a constant conversation internally, isn't it, to be in that place of stepping out as power, you know, stepping into that vulnerability and then being powerful within that, as opposed to feeling the shame of that. And on that note, it would be nice to hear from you kind of where your experiences have come from, you know, who you are now and the incredible woman, role model, you know, motivating, incredible voice that you have. Where has that come from?
It's come from growing up in a household where, you know, I wasn't able to express myself because of all the chaos and dysfunction that I grew up around. So I grew up in an estate in Southeast London, one of the biggest estates in Europe. And I was born into a situation where my mum was a daddyless daughter herself. She was adopted. My father's an immigrant, and I say that because of the layers of trauma that they had to experience within their own situations. They never got to a place where they could nurture me. So I didn't grow up with my dad living in our house present. I had quite a very inconsistent relationship with him, very in and out of my life. And my mum was with my little brother's partner at the time, and she was in a domestic violence relationship. So I grew up seeing a lot of violence, a lot of emotional abuse as well. Because I can remember times when he had just finished battering her and she would hold on to us. And that energy transference, that emotional transference from her being physically hurt like that, but then she used to pour that onto us as children. And then between the ages of 6 and 9, I was also sexually abused. My household was very, very, very dysfunctional. That's just a nice way of putting it. And I try not to kind of go into it too much, because also the things that I saw and experienced, parts of it are not my story to tell. So I have to kind of honor that, my mum's story as well.
Absolutely. So, what's your relationship with her like now, Aliyah? Like on the basis of what you've shared, has there been any healing? Has there been any kind of reparation there?
No, that's the sad. I understand like both sides of trauma, you know, because my mum still lives very much in the thick of her stuff. She was an alcoholic as well growing up, and she still drinks and smokes a lot now, and she's wrapped up in it. She can't get past what she has experienced. And I still struggle with it. And because I still struggle with, you know, that forgiveness, like trying to build a healthy relationship with her, that trickles down to other areas of my life, and trying to sustain healthy relationships in other areas of my life. So, and I see this pattern with a lot of my daddyless daughters, is like, not only do we have emotionally unavailable fathers and absent fathers, we also have either toxic mothers, or we have seen our mums repeatedly make bad decisions with men as well. So on both sides, it's a very conflicting situation to grow up in. And then a lot of the girls that I work with, and like myself, when you experience abuse at that young age, your understanding of pain and pleasure now gets distorted as well.
100%,
that
because
now plants.
Yeah, and sorry, I was just going to say the pain becomes comfortable. That's familiar. That's what we know, right? And so we enter into relationships which we don't even realize necessarily, but the energy for us feels comfortable. It feels like this is my soulmate. You know, we're connected. I don't know if you've used that terminology, but I know I certainly have. Like, it's a deep connection. Like, we can talk about all this stuff and da da da. No, that's a trauma bond, honey. That's what you're going through. I have to tell myself that now.
I'm always talking about trauma bonds. I see it everywhere within my community, you know, and it's like, you don't even have to trauma bond with an abuser or a narcissist. For me, I trauma bonded with gang members growing up because of the things that I had experienced. I felt like because they knew a certain lifestyle that they would understand my pain. But that's not what happens. And then these people start to use your pain against you. And then you end up within a cycle again. But yeah, so once you like experience sexual abuse at a young age, your understanding of pain and pleasure also gets kind of distorted. And obviously because of a result of everything that was going on in the household, I ended up in care. I ended up a looked after child. But how I ended up a looked after child, I went through the criminal justice system. I was young, I was acting out, I was angry, I was doing crazy things within my community. Ended up in court one day, and at the time I was living with my older sister. She's only 5 years older than me, so she was like 17, 18 at the time. And she just stood up in court and just said, I can't do this. And so many times she had gone to social service, she had tried to get support from the system, wasn't getting the support that she needed to nurture me, and it exploded. So she stood up in court and just said, put her wherever you need to put her. She can't come home with me, and left court that day. And then that was the day that I entered the system and became a looked after child. After there, it's like, you know, you just keep getting, I don't know how best to explain it, but at that age, I didn't understand that maybe I was being triggered, but it brought up all those feelings of abandonment, neglect. I'm not worthy. People don't want me. Where do I belong in society, you know? So
and let's talk about that, because I could honestly go on for hours about the systemic issues that we have in terms of how we deal with our young people, because obviously when we know so much now, there's so much research, there's so much neuroscience. We know that the brain reacts in a certain way, you know, that we're constantly, when we've experienced trauma and dysfunction in our home, that we sit in a classroom and our brain is on constant alert. So the littlest thing, we're going to react to it. And why is it then that, you know, we still have an education system, we still have a criminal system which continues to perpetuate those feelings of rejection and abandonment that these children have already experienced? You know, we're not giving them a new experience. We're not bringing them love and nurture and kindness and compassion that, you know, you and I, I'm sure through our work are doing. But in this, you know, this system that's been created, there's just not that space there, is there? And that's why the work of Daddyless Daughters is so crucial. Tell us a little bit more about kind of how you got to the place of using your pain as a power, you know, of setting up that organization.
So fast forward, after I kind of experienced all this stuff within my adolescent years, I ended up going to prison. I got a 4-year custodial sentence, right?
How old were you?
I was 18 when I went to prison. So literally, like, my life, my story, I talk about this so much, is that I hit every single statistic that they put out there for young people. coming from the household that I came from, and I went down the exact road they told me I was going to go down for. I was groomed to go down that road. I talk about it all the time. When I went into my children's home, I couldn't open my door, my window, the same way when I was in my cell. I had a sink in my room. I was conditioned. By the time I got to prison at 18, I was already institutionalized. I was used to hearing keys walk up and down my corridor. I was used to chaos, living in that type of environment, you know. But when I went to prison, I started to kind of open up a bit more. I had finally felt safe because I didn't have to think about how I'm going to clothe myself, how I'm going to feed myself. I was taken out of my environment. So I was given, I wouldn't say even given, I found the power and the strength to ask myself some tough questions. Who am I? Where do I want to go? So many times in my life, I had seen crossroads in my household. I saw my mum make bad decisions with men. I saw her end up in crazy situations. My sister made the same decisions. I wanted to be nothing like them. By the time I got to prison, I then saw girls who were going home on Monday. They were coming back Friday. Like, well, I'm home. They were comfortable. They were institutionalized like me. They also grew up in care like me. So I reached this crossroad in my life where I was like, you know, I can continue. I can go back out into the community and continue to make these crazy decisions, or I can dig deep. I can address my demons. I can figure out what's going on for me. I wasn't emotionally mature enough for that journey at that time, though. But I felt like I started to plant the seeds within myself. And then I started to listen to other girls' stories. And I started to realize we all in here for things that are either directly or indirectly connected to a man that we felt like we needed love or nurture or something from. And we didn't have not one positive male role model came into our lives to guide us, mentor us, affirm us.
Protect us. You know, that's a massive thing, isn't it?
That protection to provide that. They came into we attracted the men that came into our lives and they exploited us straight away. They knew our vulnerabilities, they knew our pain, they connected, trauma bonded with us, then flipped it on its head and used it against us. So I've always been like a deep thinker, and I was starting to like connect the dots from then. But when I came out, I went back to social service, and I wanted to work with young people. I wanted to work with care leavers. I had ignited this fire within my spirit that I wanted to give back. So they gave me a little rubbish voluntary role, as they do with young people. We'll pay you with vouchers here and there, claiming to understand my needs as a care leaver. Now I'm out here. I've just come out of prison. I've got a flat. I don't have not one like accredited qualification. I got all my first qualification I got in prison. And then you have the cheats to now pay me with vouchers, but claim to know what my needs are. So I was still getting triggered when I went back and was doing the work with social service. And then a job role came up, which was a paid role for participation coordinator, which basically I was playing that role anyway. I've always been a leader. I've always strived and had loads of energy. So I always used to kind of convince the young people, let's engage in this, let's do that. I played that role anyway. So when this role came up, I was like, this was made for me. You know, I was starting to gear myself up, tapping into my mentors. We felt like this was the one. And I went to that job interview, and it was in my old children's home, in my old bedroom. Wasn't prepared for that triggering. And then I felt set up because I'm coming to talk and be interviewed by a panel who were my social workers managers, who knew me, who knew the old me when I was a young, crazy child who was traumatized by her life. So I rock up to this interview. I'm in my old children's home. I'm in my old bedroom, and I'm just like trying to put my best foot forward, trying to show them the reformed side of me. But inside, my inner child is panicking, and I just couldn't contain myself. But I still feel like I aced the interview. And, you know, at the end of the interview, the young people, they interview you. I know for 100% all the young people picked me to get the job, but
obviously
I ended up not getting it. I ended up not getting the job. That triggered me. That brought me back to a place of abandonment, neglect. I'm not good enough. I kept that pattern, I continued for a long time. I kept trying to go back to my mum and get answers and get what I needed. I was never going to get it. I keep going back to my dad, trying to get answers, I'm never going to get it. I'm going back to now the system, trying to get a job, trying to get them to acknowledge me. I'm never going to get what they're asking, what I need. Once I realized that, I kind of, it set me back to a place of depression, anxiety. I felt that was probably like the worst 6 months of my life. But like I said, I've always had that strive within me. Another job opportunity came up, and it was for an organization that housed me at 16. Between 16 and 18, worst years of my life. I was crazy at those ages. And it was an organization that provides standalone flats or supported accommodation for kids who are leaving care to help them with the transition to going on into adulthood. So I challenged myself and I said, I'm going to change my name. I'm going to walk in this interview and I'm going to present myself as I stand today. And if this guy does not recognize who I am, if he gives me the job, then I'm winning and I'm going to continue on this path. If not, I don't know what God needs to make it make sense for me, you know? And I went into this interview. I did that. I changed my name. I went to the interview and he didn't recognize me. I could see it, like he's looking in my eyes and he felt familiar, but he couldn't put his finger on it. And when he called me and offered me the job, I told him, like, look, do you know who I am? This is who I was, that young person. I walked this path. And he was like, wow, I always wondered what happened to you after you went to prison. I always knew you had the potential to be somebody. And if you're ready to take that journey, I'm ready to invest in you. He gave me the job, and that was my first paid job at 27 grand a year. That was a huge achievement for me. Do you get what I'm saying? And I was like, wow. So once I got in there, it was an all-girls unit that I was working in. I started to get the same type of, like, I sparked the same type of conversations that I did whilst I was in prison. And I found out that these girls are still suffering from the same thing. They were still making the same mistakes in the community that we was making in prison, even though years had gone by. So I was still collecting, you know, a lot of resources. So I was doing my one-to-one sessions. I started blogging at this point as well. I was getting really passionate about the subject. I then started working with the Prison Reform Trust. I went back to NHS. I was doing talks, keynote speaking, just talking about my lived experience, but also connecting the dots for professionals and helping them understand how important trauma-informed services are and how we can better outcomes for these girls. You know, we're always talking about the male side of the conversation, the gangs, and how they end up. Hello?
Oh no, you're there.
So how they end up in a certain lifestyle, but we don't explore how do these girls find the connection with the gang members that they're allowing to groom them and stuff like that. So I just got really passionate about it, kept talking about it.
Just touch on that a little bit, because I know that I'm going to be making some of my young girls, some of my little queens listen to this. And I know, Aliyah, that, like, you know, just through listening to you, I've got tears. Like, I can just see their story. And like you say, like, you know, it's so familiar because it happens for so many of us. What is it like? What was your experience of that, the pull and then the process that happens with these guys, right? So for you in particular, but also what would you see for the girls that you were experiencing, and how would that play out, you know, from the initial conversations where things felt really deep and great and whatever, to then when things would go toxic, and what would be that point?
For me personally, I felt like my self-worth and how I felt like I was valued, I would make myself valuable to men. So that's how I kind of got roped into it. I was taught certain skills, county lines, bagging up drugs, all of that type of stuff. And for me, that gave me a sense of self-worth, that I'm helping somebody else get to wherever they need to get to, and I'm getting paid within the process. And also, like I said, that trauma bonding, like making it, because I feel like they understand, or they've seen pain, that they understand my pain. Therefore, this friendship is real. This experience is real. And a lot of kids that come from our community, you know, we hold on to that so much, and it's a delusional way of thinking about things, because these people This is not how friends treat each other. Friends want to see each other succeed. They don't want you to go down the wrong path, you know? But it's also that once you experience trauma, living in that survival mode, that beast, once that beast has come alive and you now understand that I have to survive no matter what, you would do anything to survive. And I was groomed criminally, but a lot of my girls are groomed sexually.
Yeah.
And that's that survival that I see within them, is that they have to do what they have to do. And just what we have created for them, that space, that the conversations that I have with them not feeling judged within that and feeling a lot understood, is what helps them connect the dots for themselves. Like when they're looking back and telling their stories, you know, we don't focus on outcomes and trying to get young people in jobs, doing this, doing that. I focus on like the internal work, the creative expression. I help them with their stories to try and find the power, like you're saying, like that how can we reverse all the pain that we experience, flip it on its head and find the power within that story. And it's through that creative expression journey that it's like a muscle. It grows and they start to grow and feel empowered when they are telling their stories.
Right.
The cycles of grooming is very similar to the cycles of being in an abusive relationship. You know, we trauma bond. We find the common ground, what we can relate to each other with first. Then they start to give you what you need. And this is the thing when you're living in survival mode. It's as simple as a meal. When you're a kid like me who's in care, who don't have nobody looking out for them, you can just give me £5. You can buy me chicken and chips. It's that simple. And I start to feel like this person's looking out for me. I start to feel like this person has my best interests at heart. But really and truly, that's not the case. So they find your need within your story.
For me, it was often the need to be accepted, you know. So it would be like, oh, this is the cool guy. This is the guy that like everyone wants to be around or whatever. Yeah. Or this is the guy that's driving. Like this is the guy that's got a car. This is the one whose name is like everyone knows. And for me, it was like I felt that I would be respected because they were respected, but not in the right way. Do you know what I'm saying? It was like the negative respect that they had. But for me, it was, I would say I was probably less self-assured and particularly more, you know, I was vulnerable. I was stupid. I would get set up and my phone would get robbed. And it would be the guy that I was seeing. It would be his friends. You know, it's only when I look back on it now, I'm like, wow, that like he must have set that up. But when you're young and that's your world, that's your everything, you know, they're your friends, they're the people that, like you say, you feel like they care about you, you know. Why
sorry, did you grow up with your dad in the house? What was your relationship?
No. So my dad had left when he actually contacted me last year. So at the beginning of quarantine, at the beginning of the lockdown, and it's a long story, but it's been an interesting one to walk through, right? Because what he didn't know is that when he left when I was about 6 months old. My mum had 5 children, 4 different men. Almost all of those men were extremely abusive, physically and sexually, to myself and my sisters. And that was my experience of males, you know, that was my experience of a man. It's even something now that I talk about and it feels edgy, it feels difficult, you know. I'm really blessed in that I have incredible male friendships now, but even now I'm like, sometimes I question, like, is that a friend? Do they like me? Is it like the boundaries are just so blurred? And honey, you know, I'm 35 and I'm still walking through this stuff and I'm still trying to understand what it means to be a healthy male and what that could look like in a relationship, in an intimate relationship, you know. And I think that when we haven't had those experiences, like I mentioned the word protection earlier, I think that there's still that little girl inside of me that wants to be protected, you know. And as my dad's come back into the picture, there's a part of me that just feels like you could never understand what I've had to experience because you were absent. So now you want to try and give me presents and whatever. And don't get me wrong, like, it's sweet and it's from a good place, but I'm not really sure that I'm ready to receive that from you. Like, and and that's just where I'm at, Aliyah, and that's been real in terms of like, where's my, the forgiveness. And yeah, I forgave my dad, like, yeah, he wasn't really around. That was easy because he just wasn't there, he was absent. And then I dealt with all of these negative men, but when now he's coming back and he's trying to be nice and kind, I don't even know how to receive that.
Yeah, and I want to touch on what you said about the intimacy, because that's what a dad is supposed to teach us, is how to build an intimate relationship with men that doesn't involve sex.
Absolutely.
And that need to feel intimate is very natural for a woman. We not even for a woman, for a girl. Like, this is a basic human need. So we go out and we're trying to find that intimacy and we're trying to find that connection. But the way that we get that connection is reversed. So we do anything to get to the intimacy, but we don't realize, because we haven't been taught the skills from our dad, how to get that intimacy that doesn't involve sex,
Absolutely.
that doesn't involve us having to go against our moral compass,
Like, you touched on the mum and like the role of the woman, and therefore what we've seen modeled to us in terms of emotional like responses and reactions. And that's been massive for me, because my mum struggled massively with mental health. She ended up having a breakdown when I was 12, so I also went into the care system, and because of that, I've never the constant battle of understanding my own emotions and then being able to articulate those, like, that's I shared the other day on social media, like, I use a feelings wheel. I'm looking on my like bedside to see if I can grab it, but legit, it's like flipping. I'm like, I'm 35 years old, I should know how I feel, but I don't. And I have to acknowledge that I don't. And I need these tools to be able to help me to understand myself, because the mother, the matriarch, that matrix wasn't set for me,
Yes. And that's now the imbalance. That's the pattern that I keep seeing with a lot of our girls. But don't get me wrong, we all come from different circumstances and stuff. So a lot of the girls who did have the positive mother who could mirror how to react to the world or how to respond to men, or their needs are not as complex as ones that are like us, the imbalance of both of them. And then you get thrown into a system that constantly neglects your needs, that doesn't even have any sort of interest to figure out what they are. You're now a number, you're now a caseload. So yeah, like that understanding of the intimacy, how do we get that, like you're saying, our own feelings. Absolutely. Can become very complex. And it has been such a long journey for me, but I keep saying to the girls, like, we're not going to be finished articles. This is something that we have to keep going. It's just a journey, and we have to just surrender to it.
And Aliyah, let's talk about that, because we talked about that obviously before we pressed record, but I think that's a similar struggle that you and I both have, and certainly that we see in our young people. And I think that they, like you say, they'll have to continue to embrace on their journey as they grow up as well and become women and enter into different types of relationships. How have you been able to kind of transition as a woman and take some of those experiences and really start to own that, but also recognize that there is pain there, and have that balance? How have you been able, or is that something you're working through? What does that look like for you?
Well, my journey first started when I found personal development. When I met personal development, it's like, wow, I can transform myself. So then
who knew the brain is like, you can change it, I can improve, like, I don't have to be this crazy person.
And like, me changing my name was like I claimed it, that was me saying, I am going to recreate myself, and I'm going to take myself on this journey. I don't care how much it hurts, as long as when I come out the other side, I am proud of who I am. I can love who I am. I can accept who I am, no matter what I did to survive, you know? So it all started for me with personal development. I started to like get my journals out. I look back at my value systems, my belief system. A lot of my beliefs were a conflict to the things that I wanted to have, like to manifest in my reality. So I constantly have to go back and look at my belief system, because that's what trauma does to us. It makes us have beliefs that contradict where we're trying to get to in life. So I'm constantly reviewing that, you know, and then I had to obviously go and do therapy. Therapy is an ongoing journey for me. I feel like it's something that
me too.
but when I get triggered by therapy, I still withdraw. Then I won't engage in therapy for a while. And now I'm learning. Now I'm at the stage of my journey because I've had a lot of complications with my health and cysts and things like that just pop up, and I can't get to the underlying root of it. So now I'm trying to understand how trauma affects our body, our nervous system, our immune system. I'm trying to really make sure that I'm balancing all different areas of those things, but it's very difficult. And like we keep saying, it's an ongoing journey. But for me, it all started with the personal development. And like I said, asking myself tough questions. If I don't have that mirror of a healthy mother and a healthy father, I now have to go look out in society, look out into the world, look at women that I respect, look at women who are honored, and what have they achieved and how did they become who they were, and build that circle of influence, and then go back and look at my value systems, the beliefs, like I said, the practices like the affirmations is something that we have to keep doing and ongoing. And vision boarding. I'm a very visual person, so I have to keep writing and expressing myself as well has become so therapeutic for me. Even attracting people like yourself, building relationships with people like yourself is healing for me, is helping me understand there is a different world out here that I can build for myself, that I can create for myself, and that I can hopefully bring these girls with me into this world.
You will, Aliyah. Like the light that radiates from you is phenomenal, and even just hearing you say that, you know, I really relate, because I too would listen to these women that, you know, I aspire to be like, or not just women, men as well, and hear their stories. But what I would rarely hear is an experience of somebody that had been through something like myself, that had been through the levels of abuse, abandonment, rejection, you know, these big buzzwords for me, big trigger words that could really relate, but had also turned it around. And I think, you know, that's the power of your story. It's the power of my story. It's the power of the stories that are yet to be told. You know, the girls that live in shame around this stuff, where shame keeps us bound and silent, and actually, you know, I'm still learning it. There's still days where I'm like, oh, I don't think I could share that. Like, I don't think I could talk about that. And I'm still working through that being able to have a voice on this stuff. You know, it took me to get to my early 30s to even engage with therapy, to even understand that I could change these things. I'd always been passionate about my career and driven in that respect, but I'd continue to have these cycles of toxic relationships with men. And I'd be like, this person that I see as a powerful woman, purposeful, driven, ambitious, successful at work, who is this chick that rocks up in a relationship? Like, who is she? Because I don't know her. She cray. And then, and really it took some, you know, and still is some real soul searching, deep digging to really understand why that little girl still appears, and what triggers that, and how I can learn to soothe her. You know, that idea of self-soothing, again, that's a newer concept for me. But where would you be at when it comes to that in a relationship? You know, like, how have you seen some of your experiences, some of your stories in your own intimate relationships, romantic relationships?
For me, it's been a struggle, because emotionally disconnected from my body a long time ago. And that journey has been very difficult, like in my adolescent years, because of the things that I had experienced. I became promiscuous. I lost my self-worth with my body. I wasn't connected to it in that sense. And I feel like because my brain chose that coping mechanism, I feel like it has been very difficult for me to reconnect and even learn how to be intimate myself within relationships. The way I can deal with relationships is very much like business. And I don't necessarily think that that's healthy either now. But that's also how I protect myself and how I go about things now. And I'm trying to go on a journey of like celibacy and trying to get my body to completely heal and be sober from all of those things. Because like I said, where I'm exploring the way trauma has impacted my nervous system, my immune system and stuff, I'm now learning about the chemical side of when you have experienced sexual abuse and the endorphins that get released in your brain, and how you have to, bring that back and really get sober.
And also the very real manifestation of the energies that are created between two people, right? When we have sex, like similar to yourself, I've been on a journey of practicing abstinence and not been perfect by any means, but practicing celibacy in this area. And it's definitely, and I do have a faith. I'm a Christian, and I was born again when I was in my late 20s, and that's been a big part of my own transformation, that spiritual understanding of my being and my purpose. But I would say that, a lot of people would see that as oh, that's religious, or oh, da da da. No, it's understanding that for me, my attachment is probably slightly different to yours, in that I have an anxious attachment style. So when I connect with you, if you try and go anywhere, or my rejection's triggered, I'm like, where are you? I'm not that cray, like, where are you? Da, da, da. But I definitely am triggered in internally, 100. And that is magnified 2000, when I've had sexual experience with someone, because scientifically it is, isn't it? Like that happens.
Yeah. And I'm still learning about, and I'm learning it like when I'm observing the Daddyless Daughters and having the conversations with them and stuff, like the attachment styles and the different ways that we're all kind of reacting to rejection and to abandonment. I still really, I don't just only struggle with men as well. I really do struggle with friendships as well, and identifying who's a real friend, who's not, what are my needs in friendship as well, and how do I need my friend to show up for me? How do I need my man to show up for me? I want to have a clear understanding of those things before I put myself back out there and vulnerable like that again, to be honest. So for me, I'm very much, I preserve myself a lot, and I preserve my energy, and I'm just a thinker, and I really have to define what this looks like for me first before I start going in that direction or trying to attain it. But yeah, it's something that I feel like it has to be an ongoing conversation. And the more that we create platforms like yours, the more we have these conversations and share our experiences and how we're dealing with them, I feel like we're going to get to a place where, we can thrive in that area of our lives. As we spoke about earlier before we recorded, there's another side to trauma that will help us with our career path, our drive, our ambition. If we tap into that beast, we could get so obsessed with information when we first come across it. We stay up for a long time or whatever. That's the good side of trauma. Every genius has a bit of insanity in them. But how do we get to that place when it comes to our relationships as well? That's something that I feel like we have to keep exploring, especially
Yeah, and I love what you said about the identifying our needs, you know, knowing what do we need from this friendship, this relationship, this partner, and then how do we articulate that in a healthy way? You know, how do we separate that need from a trauma need? You know, how do we know whether it's healthy or not? Because if we haven't seen that around us, that's a constant conversation, isn't it? And I agree, like, one that if we continue to have openly and vulnerably as a collective of women, like, the force is unstoppable, you know, because it's that femininity that makes us so powerful if we can tap into that in the right way. And girl, that's what I'm trying to do.
And you know what? It looks sexy too, you know. A lot of girls feel like, you know, being vulnerable and having these type of conversations, men appreciate the truth. We need to stop hiding from ourselves, because that's when they mock us. That's when they feel like, you know, you're not being who you say you are, type of thing.
And also that's when we attract the people that we probably don't want to attract anyway, you know, when the false version of ourselves is out there, we're just attracting another false person. I've had to ask some real soul searching questions about why I've attracted certain men into my life, you know, because I've done that. I've attracted them. I've called them with my energy, you know, and I have to really look at that as well. And that's the most challenging thing, because I can easily be like, well, they're a waste man and they're this and they're that and da. But well, what part did I play in that? You know, what red flags did I avoid? Where did I continue into a relationship that I knew that the boundaries weren't there, or that I wasn't safe, you know?
100%. And this is why I keep reiterating, it is a journey, because when you are a child who has been abandoned and neglected, you're still trying to identify, what do I need to give this child? What do I need to give myself? How do I nurture myself? How do I feed myself? How do I give myself what I need? And I feel like when we engage in relationships too prematurely after experiencing trauma, we then put that responsibility on the men. We expect them to know what I need before I even know what I need. How toxic is that? How narcissistic is that? We have to claim that as women as well.
100.
If we don't know what makes us happy, if we don't know what we need, how do they know how to show up for us? We think they need to read our minds, and that's not the case. And that was the cycle that I repeated over and over again, and it would trigger feelings of abandonment and neglect. But when I really ask myself tough questions, you're abandoning and neglecting yourself at this age, at this point. You have a responsibility to find out what it is you need, who you are, where you're trying to go, and stop getting addicted to weed, drugs, weed, alcohol, going partying, distracting yourself over and over again. But then you're expecting a man to walk into your life, be your shining armor, and all of a sudden he knows what you need. He knows how to make you happy and can provide that for you. You know,
Aliyah, it's dysfunctional. I'm so proud of you. Oh, I just want to say, like, I'm honestly, I'm so proud of you. Like, and I hope that doesn't sound in any way like patronizing or condescending, but I honestly, just talking to you, I'm just like, wow, if only I was where you're at when I was, your early 20s, right?
No, late. I'm like 28.
What? Girl, you got that lovely little baby face, you know, the freshness. You haven't got the lines that I've got that you get in your face. You probably won't get them, let's be real. Come on, as white women, we go all like but honestly though, you know, like, even in your late 20s, to be on this journey is incredible. For anyone that's experienced trauma, to be on the journey where they're pulling and pushing through that, you and I know that is no easy thing, you know. So to be where you are, and also just to be so real about it, like, it's so refreshing. And I love you. And I feel so refreshed and excited about this conversation, and really hope that I know that we're going to continue it and do some work together. And anyway, but we will. You've mentioned to me, Aliyah, and I'm super excited to read this, but you are putting out a book with Daddyless Daughters. Just tell us a little bit about that.
We're going to put out a book this year called Memoirs of a Daddyless Daughter. It's basically my voice is the narrative voice, and I speak about the layers and all the things that I'm thinking and how I've unpacked that. And then we have the girls featuring in and out of the chapters where they've written open letters to their parents, or they've just written about open letters to their younger self, poems, affirmations, quotes. It's a very creative, joyful piece, but it also is going to be, I hope, like a self-help book, something that you can kind of sit down with and just dig deep and ask yourself these questions, you know, and my voice is constantly going to be in your head after you read it. But we're very excited about releasing that. And I'm also working on a documentary where I will be going back to my old cell in Holloway. And kind of reliving that experience and talking about the transition from pain to power, baby. And I'm really excited about that.
Girl, you're a model of that.
These are my two top projects that I'm using. Thank you very much.
Amazing.
I appreciate you so much, Dominy. Thank you for having me.
No, it's awesome. And honestly, like, we're always trying to buy books for our young people that they will connect with, and that a voice that they will connect to. And the one, my go-to one always, and if you haven't read it, which I'm sure you probably have, but it is Cupcake Brown. However, it is set in the States, and there's a lot of things that are, you know, less identifiable. And so I know that I'm going to be ordering copies upon copies of your book, because it is one that our young people and our older people need to read, because, you know, understanding these experiences and bringing them into all aspects of our systems is essential. It is essential for these young people that are coming up through these kind of experiences. And we know that that's even more compounded by, you know, the cultural context at the moment, social media, blah, 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 you know, and it's, yeah, incredible work that you're doing. Where can we find you? Where can we keep up to date with what you're doing?
Well, you can keep up to date on Daddyless Daughters social media, which is Daddyless_Daughters. My personal account is Aliyah Ali_. We have our website, which is live. If anybody wants to refer themselves or wants to reach out to us, it's www.daddylessdaughters.co.uk. And yet my email is aliyah@daddylessdaughters.co.uk.
Amazing. And Aliyah posts some incredible, uplifting, inspirational content on her social media. I'm forever reposting with fire symbols and all sorts, like, yeah, this girl is on fire. So yeah, guys, stay up to date with what she's doing, and I'll also put all of those links in the description, so if there's anything you missed, just feel free to click on that. Aliyah, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to share?
No,
Hang on.
I'm very appreciative for this conversation. It's very refreshing. You are the first female podcast that I've ever been on as well, by the way. So
oh wow, seriously. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Path to Power podcast. To join our community, you can contact me on Instagram @LoveDominy, subscribe to the podcast, and get in touch. You can also find out more about my emotional health and wellbeing coaching and programs via my website, www.dominyrowe.com.